Okay, so this is the last week of this term, which means this is the last session for our security topic. So what we're going to primarily do today is do a review of the assessment. We're going to go through and take a look at the materials that come with the assessment and just get familiar with that. I will just say, just in kind of in summing up of the topic of security, we have really focused on firewalls. Firewalls is a major component of security. It certainly isn't the only component of security. But within our firewall, we've touched on a number of key elements. And in that, we looked at zones, we looked at policies, we looked at a whole range of different things. We looked at hacking defenses, and we looked at encryption in the form of our VPNs, authentication, and we looked at how to I guess, ensure message integrity, data integrity in the transmission. So security is it's a very important topic generally. Particularly in the world of IT, a very important topic, primarily because of what is at stake in this area of security and what could happen if we fail in this area of security. And because of the stakes involved, because the stakes are high, the focus, the resources that are put into this area of IT are equally as high. So what I'm saying is companies, organisations will devote money to this area because it is important and it's justified to devote expenditure, money, resources into this area of IT. The stakes are high if things go wrong. A friend of mine operates an internet dating business. They have approximately 20 million customers. That was a few years ago. We've got more now. A few years ago, they were hacked. Somebody got the customer details, not all the customer details, but quite a lot of the customer details. That information got out, got into the public domain, and the breach was continued for a period of time. They did fix it and solve that problem. However, because of the breach, there were regulatory requirements that they did not meet, and they were fined for it, and the fines were in the millions of dollars. Okay. A lot at stake if things go wrong with security. It's a very important area. I heard a shocking report this week of an incident in very recent times, very recent years, where the CIA was hacked. The identity of agents were revealed, and as a consequence, 30 agents were executed. I'm not talking about a James Bond movie, I'm talking about something that's happened in recent years. This is not the Cold War, this is recent. So the stakes are high in this area, and resources are dedicated to it. We've covered a bit of it. We've covered firewalls, but there's a lot more to it than just firewalls. Firewalls are, however, an absolute essential part of it, and you must get that right. You must get the firewall right, and then you can think about all the other parts as well. So what we're going to do, I want to review the assessment. And let's just go straight through to. Actually, I'm looking at this. Let's start off by reviewing the assessment materials. Let's just go back a step first and take a look at the documentation that comes with the assessment. Oops, back up here. So here we are. We're in week 6. There's the security assessment there. So let's take a look at the documentation. Academic honesty policy. Do pay attention to that. Basically what it says is the work you submit must be yours. Alright, so what you can't do is say, well, we're working as a team, I'll take somebody else, I'll take one of my team members' report and then I'll just submit it as mine. Well, you can't do that. It's fine to work as a team, but when you write a report, when you write your solutions for the scenarios that are there, it's important that it is your thoughts. You think through it. Yes, you may have discussed it together. When it comes to writing it down, you write it down. You write down the solutions that maybe together you have come up with, but you still have to write it down in your own words and describe those solutions and describe why you're going to do certain things. And so it must be your own writing, it must be your own words. It is important that we know that you understand. It's not good enough that we know that somebody else in your team understood. We need to know that you understood, that we're issuing you with the diploma. It's going to have your name on it, so we need to know that you understood. Okay, so that is very important. The next topic there is an introduction to cryptography by Phil Zimmerman. Now, Phil Zimmerman is an interesting character. He invented a protocol or really an encryption system called PGP, or Pretty Good Privacy, and there's a couple of documents, a couple of extra documents on that there. Now, he invented that back in 1991. Now, Pretty Good Privacy is probably not so commonly used today, but it is important because the principles that are used in that encryption system are used everywhere today. So this was early days, and the significant thing about that particular encryption system is that it took publicly available encryption technologies that were primarily used by government agencies and the military. It took those encryption technologies and it made them available to the average person. It is and uses military-grade technology. We call it military-grade because, well, military use it. But they are encryption techniques that were invented by people like Diffie Hellman that we've already discussed when we talked about our IPsec and we talked about key exchange in VPNs. We went into that key exchange protocol. Other publicly available protocols like the RSA protocol that we mentioned. So these protocols were invented prior to PGP, but PGP kind of took all the different parts and put them together into a system which is then available to the average person. And the thing is that these things are so good that you can use those protocols to encrypt something and nobody can ever crack it. Okay, so no one, the thing is, even though these protocols were invented years ago, they have never been cracked. Okay, right, so RSA has never been cracked. And it is really the foundation, that particular protocol, or it's an encryption technique, is the foundation of our public key infrastructure today. So what PGP did is it took those things and basically put them into a system. So PGP is not something that you'd probably race out and use today, but the principles that it employ are used everywhere today in everything else. So just understanding those things. And the beauty of it is it's written in plain English. Introduction to Cryptography is a very nice document. It's written in plain English. Anybody can understand it. And then the other documents around PGP are all written in plain English. So from a point of view of learning about cryptography, they are very useful, even though they're probably not going to be something you're not choose to make PGP today. Although there are programs out. There's a version of this called Open PGP, which is really just PGP, which can be used today if you chose to. But there are others. Okay, so that is. I would encourage you to take a look at that. Take a look at that document, particularly the introduction to cryptography. It's worth reading. So then we've got another document here, how to design a secure DMZ. We did talk about the concept of a DMZ. What is DMZ? Well, in a firewall, a DMZ is really a zone. It actually stands for demilitarized zone, sort of borrowed from the military, although I don't know why it's not a really accurate term to describe what it's used for, but essentially it is a zone in a firewall that is accessed from outside the organization. So you've got external users, maybe remote workers, maybe there are other organizations that you are in partnership with, that may be customers, that may be suppliers, etc., that need access into information that you have on servers that you put in that zone. An example may be a web server where you host a database that is accessed both internally from internal users and externally from external users. Another example would be a communication server where you've got telephone calls being made outbound from internal users which are connected to that server and making outbound calls. But then you have to have external users that are able to call in and make phone calls to the organization. So you must have access externally into those servers. So when you've got a situation where you need external access and internal access into servers, those servers go into a zone which has traditionally been referred to as a DMZ zone. And the traditional approach has been that you have a DMZ zone and everything that needs both internal and external access goes into that one zone. The thinking around that idea has kind of, I guess, progressed a little in that it was kind of said, well, yes, you could put everything into the same zone, but in actual fact, the firewalls that we have now allow us to really create as many zones as we need. And rather than putting everything into the one zone, I could have a DMZ type zone where I put my communication server in there because it has certain protocols that it needs to allow through the firewall for it to function. But then I can put my web server in another zone because it has different protocols that it needs to allow through the firewall into that zone. And then I could have my mail server in another zone, for example, because it has different protocols again. So they all have different requirements. So there's really nothing to stop you from separating out into separate zones and only allowing into each zone exactly what it needs rather than one zone where you allow everything in, that's all the service needs. And that's just another way of kind of isolating your security requirements into different zones. So there's nothing to stop you from doing that. For example, when we do our VPN, the traffic that comes into a VPN arrives in a separate zone. It is separate to every other zone within our firewall. And it just means that, well, we just kind of quarantine that in there, and then we say where it can go from there. So how to design a secure DMZ does kind of go across those kind of thoughts and those kind of ideas. So you can take a look at that, just to get some ideas from it. Section there on securing Windows 8. That is just pretty much an answer to a question in the exam. So there's a question which asks about that, and the answer is in there. I guess that's kind of a giveaway question, if you like, because the answer's in there. All you have to do is be able to read. So we talked about PGP, the next two documents there. SMIME is really encryption and authentication for mail. This is probably the way that things are done now. MIME stands for Multipurpose Internet Mail Extensions. It is a system for describing content, different types of content in a mail, and the S stands for secure. So that would probably be the third way if you had to encrypt mail. Although the concepts, the principles that it uses are really the same as what is used in PGP. It's just a different system of putting those things together. Great document here on understanding digital certificates. Another great document on understanding public key cryptography. And another great document on understanding SMIME. So some great resources there, which I would encourage you to access. What else have we got? That's it. Okay, so just a bit of an overview of what's available. Let's go and take a look at the assessment itself. Okay, so you're allowed to refer to your textbooks, notes, internet during the assessment, naturally. Documentation and research must be entirely your own. So, like I said, you can't just submit the next person's document and say, well, we're working together in a team, so here's our team document. No, it has to be your document. And by commencing this assessment, you confirm that you have read and agreed to abide by the ACIT academic honesty policy. Right, so we have some assessment tasks. Let's just get into them. There's the units of competency there, by the way, that we are assessing you on. You can go and look these up on the government website if you want to drill down into the detail of them. Assessment questions. So your task is, as a group of 2 or 3 people, is to redesign the network security infrastructure for Spy Technologies, which is a fictitious company, of course, so that it meets the business requirements for the organization, and to write a detailed proposal which you will submit to Spy Technologies for consideration. To complete this task, you will submit a final design proposal to Spy Technologies, which will include a detailed list of the business requirements that must be met by the security design, a complete and detailed discussion of the network security design proposal. This must include complete logical diagrams of the redesigned network and a discussion of the techniques and technologies used, e.g. clustering, zones, policies, authentication, encryption, VPNs. Talk about all these things. And when I say talk about them, I mean describe. If you said, well, I'm going to have 5 zones, why are we having 5 zones? If you said, I'm going to have 3, why are we having 3? You said, we're going to have 7. Why did you have 7? I mean, I'm not saying that there's only one right answer. What I'm saying is, if you can give a a rational discussion and reasoning as to why you chose 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 zones, and it makes sense, then that's fine. Okay, what we're wanting to get is your understanding of what you're doing. You may not need 7 zones or 5 zones or whatever. I'm just sort of throwing some numbers out there, but what we're looking for is a demonstration of understanding of what you're doing and why. Details of how the network security design will meet the business requirements. You'll also need to prepare implementation plans, document the network design and present the documentation to the appropriate person for approval. That would be your instructor. Present the design in clear and logical fashion and provide advice to the client on reasons for your design choice. This is why I did this. Okay, so most important idea to keep in mind is that the goal of any proposal is to convince the potential clients to award you their contract. So you're writing a proposal, so they've come in, and so the scenario is that this organisation wants consulting advice. They need to say, how can we improve our security? How can we redesign our firewall? How can we achieve our goals? You're going to come up with the answer to those questions. And you're going to present a proposal to them, which explains the methods and the benefits of what you're doing. Scenario: you're employed by Spine Technologies, a global business that manufactures weapons and military technology and equipment. You work in the cybersecurity division as a network engineer. Your role is to assist in the planning and implementation of security measures and general network infrastructure. So there's a company profile there. Spine Technologies is a global security and aerospace company which employs about 120,000 people worldwide. It's principally engaged in research, design, development, manufacture, integration and sustainment of advanced technology systems, products and services. The corporation sales from continuing operations are for 46.5 billion per annum. It's quite a bit of money to throw about. The company's primary business is in supplying military equipment to governments around the world. There's a security statement there, which you can go through. There's a bit more about kind of the types of encryptions and so on that they are involved with, types of technologies that they're involved with. IT services. So Spine Technologies uses the following server technologies: web servers for company intranet and web applications. This is accessed by remote workers. Mail servers used by internal and external staff. Unified communication servers. So that should get you thinking about security requirements when you start looking at those types of servers. When you think about the types of access that are required into those types of servers. Security requirements. Much of Spine Technologies' business dealings involve top secret military projects with governments around the world. It is imperative that the details of these projects remain confidential. The following measures are required. So we need a security perimeter. The security perimeter must prevent all unauthorized access to company data. What does the term security perimeter mean? Well, it simply means the point in between the outside world and the organisation, just kind of where the firewall goes. All WAN links must be encrypted and secured. All electronic communication within the company and with third parties must be encrypted and digitally signed. Measures must be put in place to protect against DOS, DDoS, viruses and all other cybersecurity threats. The solution must be fault tolerant by eliminating single points of failure. Okay, so there is a network, there's a diagram there, I believe at that link. So question 1, which is a fairly easy one I think. Would you describe a Spine Technology security requirements as high, medium or low, and why? So that's question 1. What types of security measures would you use to address each of the security requirements listed? So go back and look at the list. There's 5 things in the list. So what I'm looking for here is a short description, a couple of sentences, maybe just one will do it. What types of security measures would you use to address each? So for each one, just say, well, I would use this to address that particular security requirement. And this is stuff we've covered in the course, right? I mean, what I don't want to see, I'll tell you what I don't want to see. What I don't want to see is you going out, copying the question, pasting it into Google, Googling an answer off the internet and copying and pasting that in, and that becomes your answer. Okay, that's not gonna, that won't work, all right? Because what happens in those situations is when I see something like that, and the assessor that I work with, who by the way, the person who's going to be assessing your work is Christine King. She is currently a cybersecurity consultant for the US government and is involved in some major projects with a few government agencies, so she absolutely knows this topic inside out. And sometimes she comes back and says, Danny, this doesn't look right. And then I'll probably print out your submission, sit down and have a talk with you and say, okay, you have said this as your solution. Can you explain to me what that means? And what happens oftentimes is the person that I'm talking to will look at me rather blankly because they've simply found something on the internet that looks good, pasted it in there and said, there's my answer, and really have no clue what it means. Okay, so if it doesn't look legitimate, we will be having that conversation. Okay, and if I don't get a good answer, then you won't be passing. Okay, if I can just say it like that. I need to be assured that you know what you're saying and that you understand the topic. Okay, so question 2. Spire Technologies has adopted the following risk evaluation criteria using a qualitative risk assessment methodology. Now, just in looking at this, and we'll look at this in a bit of detail here, I guess the thing to understand here is that the topic of security, the issues of security are approached from a risk management perspective, in that we are looking at potential threats, looking at things that could go wrong. So what we are looking at is the risks of things going wrong, and in understanding what could go wrong and the risks involved, we are then able to direct our resources to properly address those risks. Because first of all, there are many risks, and secondly, we do not have unlimited resources. Okay, our resources are limited. We don't have unlimited money, unlimited people, unlimited time. We're limited in all of those things. So we need to focus our resources on the greatest risks. So there is this process here of approaching the topic of security from using a risk management approach to it, and this method of this qualitative risk assessment methodology is the way that it is approached. So in order to calculate the risk level for each risk that is to be examined, it is necessary to calculate the impact of the threat occurring and the likelihood or probability of the threat occurring. So we create in this process, it is usual to create a way of classifying those two things, of classifying how likely is it for something to occur and what would be the impact of that thing occurring. And so we have a system where we kind of classify that. So here's the impact here's our impact system or methodology. The impact can have many different effects on the business, and necessary to consider both the direct financial impacts and other effects on the business through issues such as damage to reputation, safety, disruption, etc. So this is a impact consequence matrix. This is the usual way of approaching this problem of classifying and categorizing the impact. So we have a financial impact, we've got a reputational impact, an internal disruption impact, and a personal safety impact. What we're going to say that in each of these areas we have got a measurement tool or a benchmarking criteria that will determine whether that impact comes under the critical category, the high category, the medium category, or the low category. And we're saying, well, if it's going to cost us more than $10 million, that's critical. If it's going to cost between $1 and $10 million, well, that'll be high. 100,000 to 1 million, that's medium, and less than 100,000, that's low. That's our category. Now, remember, this is a very big company. Okay, if you're doing this for a much smaller business, the numbers will be different. All right, it could be that 100K is high in a much smaller business. So, what I'm saying is that these factors have to be applicable to the particular circumstance, the particular situation that you are assessing, and the particular organization that you're assessing. So let's look at reputational damage. We're going to say critical is widespread national press, significant damage to customer confidence. We're going to say high, local press coverage, damage with many customers, medium, some damage with individual customers, and low is internal only. So that's the reputational thing. So if only the internal staff ever hear about it, that's low. But if the rest of the world hears about it, well, that's kind of high. And then there's things in between. Well, that's critical. And then there's high and medium in between. Internal disruption, whole organization unable to operate for a significant period. Then there's disruption across the organization being high, medium, business area unable to operate, and low is a local short-term disruption. So we just sort of putting all the impacts into a category. Personal safety, loss of life, that's critical. High, major injury to individual, medium, minor injury to individual, and low, potential danger. So each of these, so we've come up with 4 categories, 4 different types of impact, and then we've come up with 4 levels of impact in each of those types. So what you're doing, because this way this process works is you go through and you make a list of all the possible things that could go wrong, and then you decide if that went wrong, would it be critical, high, medium, or low, based on this table. Then we have a likelihood. So now that we know what the potential of something happening, or the consequences, if you like, of an event happening would be, then we have to decide how likely is it for that event to actually happen. If it's almost certain, then we're going to say, well, it's going to happen every year. If it's likely, then every 2 to 4 years, moderate, 5 to 10 years, low, less than once every 10 years. So that's the likelihood of the event happening. So now that we've got those 2 tables, then we come up with a risk calculation where we put this matrix together and we say, if let's just say, if a particular event is almost certain to happen, which is the likelihood, and the impact is critical, then that is an extreme risk. Okay, so we have extreme. If it's almost certain and the impact is high, well, it's still extreme. If it's likely to happen and the impact is critical, it's still extreme. Okay, so we categorize our risk based on the combination of the impact level and the likelihood. And of course, what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify where we need to target our resources first. Naturally, we're going to be dealing with the extreme risks. and then we'll work down into the high risks, and then sort of work on down through there. So this is a process that the security team would go through probably at least once a year, maybe more often, and you would then reevaluate all the possible threats and make sure that you have dealt with them, categorized them, identified any other risks that may be extreme or high that you hadn't previously identified, and deal with them. So here's an example. We have a threat here, which is DDoS, ICMP flood, UDP floods. Impact level is high. How likely is it? It's likely. The risk level is high. Another threat, unauthorized access from external source. Impact is critical. Likelihood is almost certain. So if we don't do anything about it, it's going to happen. Risk level is extreme. So somebody from outside is almost certain to want to get in to our internal data. That's what we're saying. It's almost certain that someone's going to want to do that, and the impact will be critical. Therefore, it is an extreme risk. Unauthorized access from internal device. Impact is critical. Likelihood moderate. Risk is high, and so on. So the process is putting the risks into various categories and making your list, and then assigning everything on the list a risk level. Okay, so we've got threats here. What is a threat? Definition of a threat. This is taken from international standard, which is HB 231. A threat is a potential cause of an unwanted event which may result in harm to a system or organization. And another definition from another international standard, HB 167, says, alternatively, a threat is anything that has the potential to prevent or hinder the achievement of objectives or disrupt the processes that support them. A source of or potential for harm to occur. A threat can be a source of risk. So there's a couple of definitions there around what is a threat. So that's going to kind of inform you as to what should be on your list right here. Okay, so now we get to the question. Okay, we haven't actually asked a question yet. Now we finally get to the question. Using your list of threats, create a table. So, well, actually, the first question is, I think about question 2. The question really is make a list of threats. That's really the question in question 2. So make a list of threats. Make a list of possible cybersecurity threats. Allocate each of them an impact level, likelihood, and risk level. Now we get down to question 3. Using your list of threats, create a table that lists the defenses for each threat. Okay, so what are we going to do about them? How can we defend against that particular threat? What tools do we have available to us that we could implement to mitigate that risk, deal with that threat? Okay, question 4. Design the firewall configuration. Your design should include the following. So we're talking about a firewall for this organization, Spine Technologies. So we're looking for the name of each zone that you will create, the inter-zone policy objectives, including traffic allowed into the zone, traffic allowed between the zones, and other security measures to be implemented in the policy. Method of securing traffic from site to site. Method of securing traffic to and from the public internet. Okay, so how do we secure the traffic that's just heading for the internet and coming back from the internet? How do we make sure, I guess we're just looking at the general security of traffic that may be flowing into our organization from outside, from the public internet. Okay, question 5 is, so what we're looking for, go back to question 4. So looking at the zones and the policies. Okay, so this really is the basics and the fundamentals of your firewall here. So what I'm looking for is just, these are my zones, and these are what my policies are going to achieve. I am going to allow all traffic from this zone to that zone. I'm going to allow maybe no traffic from this zone into this other zone. are going to allow some traffic. In other words, these protocols from this zone into this zone. Okay, so that's the kind of information that I'm looking for. Write the Juniper SRX configuration required to implement all the functionality described in your answer above. Now, what I'm saying to here, write the configuration. We do actually have configurations that are available to you on our FTP servers. Okay, so when I say write a configuration, you may take a configuration that is already there and tweak it a little bit, change it. In other words, I'm not expecting you to just write something from scratch. What I'm allowing you to do here is to look at a configuration that achieves the goals and take that configuration and say, well, this configuration is a configuration which implements security, it implements zones, it implements policies. This is what this configuration does. Okay, so you're allowed to take it and just use that configuration. Okay, question 6. Design a failover redundancy for the firewall so that a stateful failover of processes and services will occur in the event of a system or hardware failure. Provide a diagram of your design and a description of how failover will be achieved in the event of a failure. Now, there's a reference there, which really has the answer to the question. So we did talk about redundancy, we talked about systems that will provide us with redundancy and failover in case of a hardware or system failure. So if you would go and look at that reference, your memory would be refreshed as to exactly what we discussed there. Okay, question 7. Provide a typical failover redundancy configuration. So this is a typical one, and again there's a reference there for you to go and take a look at and to find a typical redundancy failover configuration, and they are available on a FTP server. You just got to find the right one. Question 8. Provide a typical site-to-site VPN configuration for a Juniper SRX firewall. Again, there's a configuration available. You just need to know which one is the right one that will implement a VPN. Question 9. List the tests you will perform to verify that your security measures and VPN are functioning as expected. We have a reference there to what sort of tests you may need to perform. Question 10. Do you want to encrypt email communications between all company staff and business associates? What program could you use to do this? What are the advantages of the program? What type of encryption would be used? What encryption algorithms would be used? So we've got some references there to the PGP documentation written by Phil Zimmerman, and also the Understanding SMIME. So there's lots of information there as to what or how you may deal with those issues of encryption and authentication. Question 11. You want to ensure the integrity of email and other digital communication. So just get back to these questions. Question 10. You want to encrypt email. I just want to draw your attention to the part of that question that says what encryption algorithms could be used. That is an important part of the question, and that part of the question goes with the first sentence, which says you want to encrypt. Okay, so just bearing in mind that there are algorithms which are encryption algorithms, but there are other algorithms which deal with other things like integrity. I just want to point out to you that the algorithms are different. The algorithms that deal with encryption are different to the algorithms that deal with integrity, And moving on to question 12, we have authentication processes and also algorithms. And just to point out, the algorithms that deal with authentication are different as well. Okay, so you need to split out the difference between encryption, integrity, and authentication, and understand how each of those things are achieved. Even though they all work together, there are different algorithms and methodologies that we use to achieve each of them. Okay, I just want you to have the clarity to say this achieves encryption, this achieves integrity, and this achieves authentication. So you know the difference. Okay, question 13. Evaluate the following providers of digital certificates and create a comparison table. That information is just readily available online. It's just a little bit of research. Just put it together. That's fine. Where I've given you a reference to a website, well, yes, you're allowed to go and use that information off the internet. Question 14. Provide a brief summary of Kerberos and NTLM authentication. Describe the benefits of Kerberos authentication, and that's that module 10 security in Windows document which is provided with this assessment material. Naturally, the answer is in there. Question 15. Provide a brief summary of biometrics for authentication. Describe the benefits of using biometrics for authentication. There's 3 devices you could use to provide biometric authentication, and the answer is in that same document. And question 16. Write your proposal to Spine Technologies. The following link may help. There's information there about how to write a information technology business proposal. It's just sort of generic, but it gives you some guidelines on how to put that together. Submission requirements. The written task must be completed on a word processor and uploaded to the learning portal. You must clearly indicate which question each answer relates to. So we want to have question whatever. Here's my answer. The device configuration should be included as separate files which are clearly named. The Visio diagram, so we want a Visio diagram, should be saved as a PDF and uploaded. All files must have your name in the file name, and remember, you must click the submit button. You must click the submit button. Okay, so what happens sometimes is you can upload it, you can save it, but then you think, well, I've done. Now you've got to go to the next step and click submit. Okay, so that is our assessment right there. So a few things to work through, a few things to think about. Okay, so any questions on that? Is there anything in there that you looked at and thought, I have no idea what that means? All good? Okay, well, that basically wraps up this topic. What I'm going to let you do for the rest of today is get on and finish your labs for this topic, and if you like, you can get started on the assessment. Okay, well, good. So that's it until next term. All good. Okay, thank you.